Hello and welcome back to the ROI channel, the channel that's obsessed with the art and science of return on investment. And my next guest today is an expert when it comes to the geo-arbitraging of life. My guest is the bow-tied Mara. We're going to talk about what this whole bow-tied movement is. We're going to be talking a little bit of macro, particularly focused on Latin and South America. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Latin life, in particular Argentina, a country which this man knows very, very well. We're going to touch on the economics. We're going to talk about the culture. We're going to talk about the women, the wine, the steak. And of course, we're going to have our ROI segment where we talk about the past and the future with regards to ROI. It is my pleasure to introduce El Señor Mara. Welcome to the channel, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
My absolute pleasure. Guys, if you're not following Bowtied Mara on Twitter, you are missing out. There's some epic content that he puts out. All his details will be in the description. And today, a little bit of housekeeping, guys. Anything that we discuss on the channel is just opinion-based or for entertainment, educational purposes. Nothing is to be considered personal financial advice, nor solicitation to buy any particular security. So with that, my friend, what is happening down there in Argentina?
Well, you know, the usual chaos, 100+% inflation year over year, and things going up a lot more than in the previous years, but it's going faster. I think we're hitting an accelerated pace right now, and it will probably be, you know, triple digit for sure this year, and next year I think it will really start to go into, you know, the 150% plus range of inflation. Yeah,
that's incredible. For those of us in the Western world that thought that high single or double digit CPI numbers were bad, imagine triple digit inflation. It's basically your currency has died. And I think that if you can talk a little bit and very, very briefly around the history of monetary or currency inflation in Argentina, and perhaps touch on some of the reasons why you think it will continue to get worse over the next few years. I'd be very interested to get your perspective from someone with boots on the ground as to what has occurred, why that might have occurred, and what needs to be done about it. Just briefly.
Yeah. So yeah, I have, if you're interested, like I have written like a few Substacks on this. But, you know, it can really be boiled down into a very short description, which is basically eternal deficits being funded by the printing press. And that's what happens in Argentina all the time. Sometimes there's a bit of a gap where it doesn't happen, like in the 90s, where they had the one-on-one peg with the dollar, and there was almost no inflation. But the average inflation rate over the last 100 years has been 100% plus. So that's the average. So overall, the deficits always get funded by the printing press, causing devaluation and you know, insane inflation over time. And that has just never ceased. And the politicians always try to blame it on, you know, the bad business people that always up their prices. You know, the classic stuff that is happening in the West right now as well. I mean, you see the same discourse, and it's really funny to see that where they try to exactly, you know, give the same motives as the people here have been doing for the last, you know, almost 100 years. And, you know, it's really central bank policy, basically, and you know, together with politicians.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. When I first heard Cuppy speaking about his Project Zimbabwe thesis around how the US deficit is at such a point now where there is no going back. I mean, 130% debt to GDP with off-balance sheet liabilities into God knows how many trillion. Eventually, you can raise rates all you want. The interest level that raising rates causes means that there's no way out other than to print your way out. And I first thought it was maybe a little bit exaggerated or hyperbole, but I mean, we're literally seeing it play out. And Argentina is like It's like the case study of what happens when you do that. I mean, Weimar and Zimbabwe are obviously very bad, but as you mentioned, if your average, not the peak, if your average is 100% inflation, I mean, it's mind blowing to try and get your head around it. I want to
Yeah.
talk to you around this bow tie movement. I had no idea what it was about. Give us a brief, I guess, 1 minute summary of what is this bow tie movement and why are so many people kind of jumping on the bandwagon?
So yeah, the bow tie movement is initiated by Bowtie Bull, which is a cartoon character originally from Wall Street. They originated from Wall Street Playboys, and they had a blog and wrote a lot there. And then they shifted to Substack and started writing a lot about crypto under that pseudonym. And basically, the idea is to create a digital nation where it doesn't matter who you are, or your personal data doesn't matter, as long as you have interesting content. People will follow you and subscribe, and you will make money, basically. So the idea is like it's really 100% what you write and what kind of information you can provide that is of value for others, versus being a personality and relying on personal traits, or selling something with your appearance or whatever. So it's instead of the whole influencer movement, it's like the complete opposite, where it's like it's about the content and the data.
I love
And
it.
everybody has his or her own niche. So my niche would be more like Argentina and LATAM related, and global mobility. But there's people that do skincare, others that are like deep into mergers, M&A. There's everything under the sun, like even a dentist. So
Yes, I am familiar with the I am familiar with the dentist on Twitter. Maybe that's where I'm going wrong. Maybe I should hide my face and put a bow tie on, and I might be able to sell some more sell some more memberships. Where were you when I needed you, sir? And I want I want to get your take on. We were speaking offline about your background. Maybe give us a 2 minute summary of your backgrounds. It's very interesting, and what led you to do what you are currently doing today in terms of your services, and in particular focusing on the soft spot. Give us a little bit of a spiel about your background and the services that you currently offer.
so yeah, I moved to Argentina from Europe originally. I moved here in 2005. Started working at a digital agency right after the first 2 years, where I was a personal assistant virtually for a company in Europe, where I managed servers and agendas, GPS locations, etc., all online. And that really gave me a perspective into how powerful it is to just be somewhere completely separated from your work location, basically. And that was way before COVID. I mean, we're talking 2006, 7. At that time, that was not common at all. I mean, I think that was the year that Facebook had just come out, and it was all sort of, just getting started. But yeah, then at a certain point, that company went bust, and I had to look for another job, and went to look for a job here in Argentina with a peso salary at a digital agency. And that's how I found out like how hard it is to get by on a local salary, and it's basically impossible. I mean, I had bought a home at that time already with the help of my parents. But I had to do a lot of remodeling, and of course I didn't have the budget for that. So I actually got into debt at that time with the local bank, and those interest rates, it's just the same as with those sovereign debt rates. It's impossible to pay back because they were, of course, above inflation. Now at that time it wasn't as bad as now, but it was around 30-40% already.
That's
So
bad enough.
you're yeah, and you're talking about interest rates for on a loan from a bank around 50-60%. Now your salary is never going to catch up with that. So yeah, quickly I realized that I had to get out of that peso salary and do something else. So with a colleague from the States, we decided to create our own agency and have our own clients. We even took some clients from the agency that we were working with because they wanted to go with us. So
Part of
so
life.
yeah, we did that, and then well, we actually made another mistake there because we decided no, but we still want to be a legit company locally in Argentina. So we set up a local company, did everything by the book, even had like a bunch of local clients, and that was like a second error that we committed because it's just so much harder to do business here because of all the taxes. You have around 116 taxes, and they change all the time as well, and a lot of them are overlapping. So technically, if you want to do everything by the book, and we were so rookie that we thought like, oh yeah, we have to do this to make stuff work. You're talking about a minus 10% no matter how much you invoice. It's really that insane. That's why the whole economy here is basically on the black market, or 50% plus, is because it's almost impossible to do everything by the book, even if you wanted to.
Yeah. Okay. So for newer listeners, we've got a lot of themes here, but we've got inflation rising faster than your salary. So your salary may go up 10%. If inflation's going up 30%, you're not going to be celebrating that pay rise, guys. That is a treadmill from which you cannot exit. Then we've got taxes on top of taxes on top of taxes. When the government runs up so many debts, it inflates the debt by printing money to soften the real value of those debts, but also it looks around to gather as many tax receipts as it can. And who pays taxes? The most productive people in the economy. And so you start to have this situation where capital flees, literally runs away like a refugee capital out of the country. And of course, you have that lack of foreign capital coming in, which is critical to investments in the future. That's so fascinating. Talk to me about real estate in Argentina. So you took out a mortgage. How does one do that? Is it a good idea if you're potentially earning in, let's say, a stronger currency, and then
Um,
you can put debt on a real asset? Essentially, that's going to
um,
inflate away the
so
debt,
yeah,
right?
yeah, technically, but so I didn't take out a mortgage because mortgages are almost impossible to get because of credit scores, etc. You almost need to leave an organ at the bank for them to give you a mortgage. Now, I had like a small loan just to do some remodeling at my. It was like $10,000
Okay.
or something.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a big loan, but even that was already like, I saw that going up so fast that I was like, yeah, I need to find something else in terms of income just to pay this off as quickly as possible. But yeah, mortgages are almost non-existent here, just because there is no credit. And yeah, banks, they generally do not tend to give those kind of loans. All property is based in US dollars, and people tend to pay for the property in cash. So you can really, once you buy a home, you just have a big chunk of dollars on the table. Or yeah, of course, nowadays most people do a transfer, but it's still very common to just buy a home like completely in cash. I actually bought my home, I just took a taxi with my backpack with all the dollars in there and just paid for it that way.
This is like something out of a movie going back 50 years. That's
Yeah.
incredible. So talk to me about the services that you offer for your company and
Mhm.
SodSpot. We'll do a 2-minute overview, and we'll delve down this so many practical constraints like carrying that amount of cash in hand that I want to get into. But tell me about your services. Who is your ideal client with which you work, and what sort of things do you do for them?
So yeah, right after we created that local company, and we got totally screwed over by one of our employees, which is very normal in Argentina and something we didn't know that would happen, but it did, and it drained all our finances. Because here, once you fire somebody, it's really common for them to sue you afterwards. And that's basically how we ended up closing out the company and starting a new company in the US. So just as a bit of background there for this company that I'm working with now. The services that we do are mainly targeted towards either European companies or US companies in the investment migration space. So for people from all over the world that are interested in or moving to the US, or Americans or other people that want to move, for example, to Portugal, or other kinds of investment programs. And we work with those investment agencies and with immigration attorneys. So it's a little bit of a mix. And what we do there is website development and the ad campaigns. So any social media campaigns, Google ads, basically anything that we can show positive ROI on, and client acquisition, HubSpot implementation, like all those more technical lead gen activities is what we specialize in.
Okay, interesting. So you're targeting mainly the professionals associated with international migration for people looking to start businesses in foreign countries?
So yeah, it's either a business investment or a real estate investment that is associated with obtaining a second citizenship, or just a residency in the case of the US, for example, where you start up a business in the US for a certain amount and then you can obtain a visa.
Okay, got you. And Sovereign Spot, talk to me about SovSpot. What is it? Who is it for?
So yeah, that is a little bit my personal project, where I want to create a platform that is based on every kind of investment migration option out there. Also non-investment, so digital nomad visas are also under there. And what I want people to be able to do is to search per country, like what options are available, what can I invest in, how can I move there, and then connect them to immigration attorneys or investment agents that can help them do that. So basically be the middleman that provides that service. And I would only want to monetize that in a way where the people offering their services on the platform would pay for it, so not the end user.
I like it. Okay, so you're offering a platform with almost an advertising model paid for by the service provider
Yeah.
to have the opportunity to advertise their services. Very interesting. And guys, we're going to have all the links to the topics we discussed in the video description. So if you want to get in touch with the great man himself, you will be able to do so. I had a list of questions around some other topics, and I'm going to throw that out the window because I just want to delve into Argentina. I'm reading a DM on my Twitter from a buddy of mine down there who is living what seems to be an epic experience. He's saying, bro, some thoughts. I'd skip. I told him what my previous plans were. So he's saying, I'd skip those. I'd head down to Argentina. Quality of life and price of literally everything here is like no other. Eating steak and drinking wine for $5 to $15 at high-end places. I want to get your thoughts. You've just told me about some of the perhaps not so good aspects of Argentina. My buddy here doesn't seem to care. He's living the high life. Talk to me about the opportunity for perhaps a foreign investor or someone coming into the country. We've seen the negatives about the currency depreciation. Does there exist a positive side of that if you reframe the opportunity and say, well, if I have the ability to earn in a stronger currency and then to pay my expenses in a depreciating or dying currency in this case, how many people are doing this at the moment? What are you seeing on the ground, and what are the opportunities that someone in that position might have in a country like Argentina?
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity there, and that is something that I discovered again when I moved my my business over to the US, and I started earning in dollars again, because that was really the time where everything took off in terms of investment opportunities. So yeah, that was one of the opportunities that I thought like, okay, and now I'm in. And that was really the moment where I started making, of course, a lot of money in dollars. and I started to take a huge advantage of the local economy. So I already bought my house. I had the opportunity to buy my neighbor's house at that point, and luckily, all the house prices are going down in this scenario, and they're going to go down for the foreseeable future, I think, because there's just no liquidity left. All the middle class Argentines have their capital in bricks, basically, or stuffed under a mattress, but that's the minority. That most people have just bought their home and that's it. And so there's no liquidity in the system, which means that if they need money, they are prepared to sell at a significant discount, even when you compare it to published prices on platforms.
Wow.
So right now, in the last 2-3 years, I think it's gone down about 30-40% already in dollar terms, real estate. And I think that can still, you can still find significant deals even below those numbers. So that was one of the things that I did 2 years ago, or no, a little bit longer ago. 3 years ago, I bought the house next door, remodeled everything, and basically joined those two houses, and even built another story on top. And this would be completely impossible to do in my original country. It's just like yeah. So those are things that you come across here, and of course, I also know quite a few local people that help me find opportunities. Like, for example, one ex-client who's a lawyer, and he is specialized in heritage and inheritance and all those kind of things. So here with inheritance, there's an interesting dynamic at play that you cannot exclude people from a will. So in terms of direct family, so it's always 50% goes to the spouse and 50% to the children. So this brings interesting situations whenever somebody dies, because they all have some infighting and nobody agrees on what's going to happen, etc. And at the same time, they all need the money. So sometimes there's some really interesting deals where they just need to get rid of a ton of property because they want to divide the cash, because nobody can agree on what to do with the property except for selling it. So that is
because everyone's chasing that hard currency.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to delve into some of the practicalities around that. So, man, the opportunities there are obviously very, very tempting from an investment standpoint. How comfortable do you feel buying a physical, tangible asset that really can't be moved? How comfortable do you feel doing that with in a country like Argentina, whose government is, let's say, not shy about relieving foreign investors from their property?
Yeah, I mean, that has happened in terms of some bigger companies like YPF, the national oil company, that they sort of repossessed against shareholders' will. But on the ground with private property, that stuff doesn't really happen. So that was just like a populist showcasing for their policies, and like, oh yeah, this nationalist sentiment for this company that is so important to our nation, blah blah blah. But on the ground, it's actually pretty beneficial for private owners. Like, for example, if you declare a home as your private residence where you live, even under a bankruptcy, they cannot take that from you. So that's a little, it's really protected because your family lives there, etc. Now, okay, that's one property. Of course, I have other properties as well for Airbnb, etc. So
So how do you get around that? So I understand, okay, in a very socialistic type hierarchy, your domicile, your primary residence, is sacrosanct, and it would be very bad optics for the government to steal that. How do you then go to the next step and really take this to the next level, buying physical assets, which I presume you rent out in dollar-denominated rents?
Yes.
How comfortable do you feel about that property being confiscated?
Well, I think the confiscation is something that hardly ever happens unless you are really, really high on the radar in terms of, company level with thousands of employees,
Okay.
that has a nationwide impact. So, there's some talk about some really big seed exporters, et cetera, that they're looking into. But, if you're just a guy with a couple of properties, they're not going to, really do anything about that. Now, there's of course um, some things lingering in the background where they talk about, if you do not rent out your property legally, or you need to have a contract or whatever, they could force you to rent it out, because there's so many properties that are vacant right now in the city. They're all used for Airbnbs. Of course they're going to create some kind of regulation around that, but the nice thing
They
about
always try.
Argentina is they are so creative. Like, really, this could be potentially, and it was at a certain time, it was the richest country in the world, and they could well be again, because any kind of regulation that gets thrown at them, they find some sort of creative alternative to just circumvent it and not, pay attention to it. So that's great. I mean, they are super creative in that sense. So that's why I'm not too worried about, whatever regulation's coming, there's always a way out, so to say. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're just a guy with a bow tie, you can probably fly under the radar a little bit. I like it.
Yeah.
You've got to talk about the practicalities. How do you get the dollars into the country, and how do you access them? So I've heard from various different people that there's a limit at ATMs being able to withdraw cash. A friend of mine who tells me that when they need dollars, they go to La Cueva, the
Yeah.
cave, where I've just got this image of people going down a dark alley on the black market with this blue dollar rate, which is something that we can talk about. Talk to me about the practicalities of, you wanted to buy a house, you needed to get your hands on the cash. How did you get the cash into the country, and then where does it go from there?
So yeah, that's a good question, because that is something that is quite a challenge. And the first thing you learn as a tourist when you just arrive here is that you never ever take anything out of the ATM, because you will get the official rate, which is twice as expensive. And it's just an artificial rate that nobody really uses except for the government. But if you take it out of the ATM or pay anything with an international credit card, they will charge you that exchange rate. So you will have to exchange on the black market. Otherwise, you will pay double for everything, basically. So yeah, when you want to buy a home, the big problem is always getting the dollars in. So what these cuevas offer you to do is to either transfer the dollars to a third party outside of Argentina, and they give you the cash here for 2 to 4% fee. And they will actually, I do that quite often, and you can just order that, and then it comes delivery at your home. They give you the dollars in your hand. So there's this delivery guy. It's just sort of like Uber Eats, who brings you these dollars, cash or pesos, whatever you want.
Okay.
So that's one way. That the downside there is that you cannot really do a source of funds. So if you buy a very expensive property, that is not really a legit way to do it. So the best way to buy a property that is, I would say, over like 100K, you would probably want to do it a little bit different, where ideally the seller or the agency that is selling the property has a US bank account where you can just directly wire the money to, and that can figure in the contract, and that's no problem. So it doesn't have to go through Argentina
At all.
No, because as long as the seller pays his taxes on what's in the contract, then everything is fine.
Okay, so essentially you're using almost like an escrow service outside
Yeah,
of the country in a trusted bank account.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha. So interesting. Wow, what a fascinating chain of events. So I got to ask you this. What is it about Argentina in particular that drew your attention? I've spoken to people involved in Latin America, and there are all
Mhm.
sorts of different options. Argentina is not the only option when it comes to the ability to work remotely and to have a cheaper currency to denominate your expenses. Why Argentina in particular?
So yeah, I did travel around a bit before settling in Argentina, and I've also lived in Brazil for almost a year, um, which I very much liked. I still love Brazil, and would go back, but maybe not to live like full time, but going on holidays is definitely a very nice country also. But yeah, Argentina is just in terms of opportunity, and geo arbitrage. It's one of the best high quality of life you can get in Latin America, because if you compare, Brazil is a lot of partying. It's all very nice in terms of going out, and there's a lot of business to be done as well. But it's a little bit more formal, which is good in a sense, because it means their economy is a little bit more legit. But at the same time, there's less opportunity there, and there's also less geo arbitrage in general, just because things are a lot more expensive than in Argentina. Um, and the quality of life is definitely something that is lower in that sense. Like, you need a lot more cash to have the same quality of life in Brazil than you would need here. And you have the security issues. I mean, I've never really experienced that much, except for Salvador when I went there. And that's a city that I really thought was kind of sketchy. But even in Rio or in Sao Paulo, I've never had any issues in terms of security. But as soon as you come to a certain level of wealth, and of course, anywhere where you want to display that, you're going to be a target in Latin America. That's just no question. But I just feel that in Brazil, you're a little bit more on the radar than in Argentina. For some reason, even despite all the problems that Argentina has, you're not so much of a target, and everybody's still sort of accustomed to seeing middle class or upper middle class people, and you don't really need to watch your back the whole time. It's sort of like being in a European city in Buenos Aires, as long as you stay out of maybe some sketchy neighborhoods, which you would never visit anyways as a tourist or somebody from abroad.
Okay, interesting. So you think that European influence culturally makes Argentina perhaps an easier place to blend in, with
Yeah,
you being originally European.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, interesting. So I've got to ask again, there's so many thoughts running through my brain. When we talk about living in Argentina, there's various options. In terms of permanent residency, in terms, is it even necessary if you're looking to do this kind of geo arbitrage? I think you can be in Argentina for what, 90 days. And from my understanding, a lot of people might stay in Buenos Aires for 90 days, skip over to Uruguay on the ferry for a weekend, and then come back. And all of a sudden, their 90-day tourist visa renews. Talk to me about some of the options about staying in the country if you are either an investor with enough cash that you can bring liquidity into the country, or if you have an online business such as yourself where you're set up in terms of a digital income. How do you then get yourself in the country, stay in the country without running afoul of the authorities, and playing that game of avoiding becoming a tax target, but being able to
Mhm.
stay in the country?
So yeah, there's multiple ways of going around that, and it's kind of depends on your personal goals. So there's a lot of foreigners that actually own property here and just rent it out. The returns are not insane, and I would say, like, if you want to buy property here, I would see it really more as like a personal investment that you think you really want to have, because it's not, it's so volatile that you should see it as a high risk investment. And it could be very interesting, or it could return absolutely nothing. But if you plan on making that bet, there's a couple ways you can, as you said, go here and then stay for 90 days, go to Uruguay for one day, even on the same day, return and get another 90 days. Or you don't even have to go to Uruguay. You can just go to the migration authorities and say, like, I want to extend my stay. You need to pay like a small fee, and then they give you another 90 days. Now, it used to be the case that there were a lot of foreigners living here for years on end, and they just went to Uruguay every 90 days on the same day, got back, boom, new stamp. They would just go on with their lives without any residency permit whatsoever. Now, that has become a little bit stricter now. They
God damn
do
it.
start, yeah, they start asking questions if you do that like too often. Plus, the downside is that you never really integrate in terms of, you know, getting a local ID number, and you can't really get a lot of the local services. Internet you can, because you can, on a passport, you can just get internet services.
Okay.
But something as cell phones, etc., is like a little bit harder. And local bank accounts are next to impossible unless somebody hires you as an employee for, you know, a local company.
Okay, that's fascinating. I love the idea of being there for 20 years on a tourist visa. That is
Yeah, no, it is very funny. I mean, and it's not even that hard to do, to become like a local resident. And you know, to be honest, nobody declares their full income if they earn outside of the country. So it's really, you know, you just declare the main necessities or your basic living expenses, and the rest you just leave outside of Argentina.
and okay, so enough to be able to have enough of a paper trail so that you can get connected to utilities and services and all that sort of things for which you require those things. But
Yeah.
everything outside of that is off the books, shall we say. You've been
Mhm.
there for what, 18 years now. Did you go, if you don't mind sharing, did you go via the permanent residency route, or did you go all the way through and get a passport? My understanding is the Argentine passport is one of the easiest to get. The question
Mhm.
is, do you really want to get it? Because once you get it, you can't renounce it. It'd be interesting to hear your story.
So yeah, that is true. I personally went through a different route because I was still studying in Europe at the time, and I was studying Spanish. And I also did a Portuguese course where I met my now ex-wife from Brazil. We moved to Sao Paulo first, and then afterwards to Buenos Aires, because she was studying here at the University of Buenos Aires. And through her, I got my permanent residency because she was a Mercosur resident. She had a passport, of course, of Brazil. And if you have a Mercosur passport, you can live in any country almost in South America except for Chile. So it's almost like the EU in that sense. You can migrate freely, and that's why so many Venezuelans live here. You know, right now Venezuela is blocked from membership because of, you know, maybe you know, the dictatorship issues. But they were a full member before, and at that time they could move freely. But yeah, basically anybody with Mercosur passport can live in any of the other countries. So there is quite a bit of migration there. So that is how I got it, like as a permanent resident. And afterwards, you know, we divorced, etc. But I still stayed on as a permanent resident.
Okay, fascinating. And with the passport program, my understanding
Hmm.
is if you were to spend enough time in the country for just 2 years, you would then be able to apply for a passport. Now,
Yeah.
with the bureaucracy in Argentina, it may take another 2 years before the thing actually arrives. However, that's another story. Talk to me about a few of the details with this passport, because the passport itself on paper looks good in terms of
Hmm.
gaining entry into, I think, 124 different countries. But obviously, then you would be then required, you would qualify as a tax resident, and you would then need to lose that residency by staying out of the country for at least 12 months. Talk to me about some of the peculiarities when it comes to the Argentine passport, because I mean, 2 years getting a passport seems like a pretty good deal.
Yeah. And the Argentine passport is a really good one. You know, a lot better than a lot of the other South American passports. Um, and yeah, for me, I never got the Argentine nationality because my original citizenship doesn't allow dual citizenship. So, and I know that Argentina, they tell the other country of origin immediately, hey, we have another Argentine citizen. So that's why if they wouldn't tell, I would have gotten it, but they do tell. So that was a no-no for me. But yeah, if that weren't the case, I would have definitely gotten it. Yeah, and it's actually after 2 years, and it's a fairly easy process. You just have to prove your ties to the country, prove that you have some sort of house, or you've been living there for a while, and it's all pretty easy. And you just have to book an appointment with the judge, and then they do an interview, and that's it. And then basically you get citizenship. So yeah, it is a really easy process, but it depends on how you get the residency. So because the first 2 years is just it's not permanent residency, it's temporary, and then afterwards then you get permanent residency. Now, so technically you could get it after those first 2 years, but usually it's better to, wait another year and say like, okay, yeah, now I've had like 1 year of permanent residency. Now I'm really part of the country, et cetera, just to improve your chances. But as anything here, you can probably get it within 2 years.
There's always that creative streak. I see. That's very interesting.
Exactly.
I mean, as far as these things go, to get I believe a tier 1 passport, that's extremely interesting. And do you help people, or can you point people in the right direction when it comes to residency option and potential citizenship? Is that part of what you advise on?
So yeah, personally, I can help people with that. It's not one of my core capabilities, because I'm more of, the connector, or the marketer that connects those immigration attorneys to people looking for those options.
But you can put
yeah,
people in touch with the right people.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. I like it. Okay. It's time. We might move on to the ROI segment, where we talk a
Okay.
little bit about ROI. And I would love to know if you'd be happy sharing what your highest ROI from any investment to date is. If you've got the numbers handy, we can dig into those, and perhaps give us a little bit about the backstory.
All right. So let me just get a calculator. Just because I've never actually calculated that. Let's see.
You will need a calculator if it's in pesos.
Yeah,
There'll be several
exactly.
several decimal places.
So yeah, I would say it's about 2500% ROI, and that's not on any pesos. It's actually cheating, because I got into crypto early, so that's why.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us, how did you, because you are an original gangster when it comes to this, a pioneer. 2006, you started this, what we call Geoarbitrage now. Like, this is even, I think, before Tim Ferriss was writing about it in his books. How'd you get into the crypto, and give us a story around what happened with that? It's 2500%. We're talking a 25 bagger, right? Like 25 fold. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, maybe even a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, and that was, I mean, if we would take the peak, of course it's way more, but this is like what's left. So I don't take the peak into account of the bull
Okay.
market.
So this is
But
a mark to market as it is today.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, how did I get into crypto? It was all through digital marketing. Also, there was this one guy here in Argentina, of course. Then they're always pioneers with this kind of stuff. He was at the agency, and he was telling everybody, and the manager. He said, "Look, if you really want to make money, you just need to fire everybody, and just put servers everywhere and start mining Bitcoin." And this was in 2010. This guy was like super early.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me it never really sunk in until like 5 years later. So in 2015 I remembered that guy, and I was like, whoa, that dude was so early. And then I started investing a little bit in crypto. um, but yeah, it came back what he said at that time, and I think he invested like quite a significant amount. And there's so many people here in Argentina in the crypto space, and developing all sorts of things on top of Bitcoin and everything. So yeah, it's a really active space. And of course it's also because of all the capital restrictions. You can't get money in and out of the country, so a lot of people just use crypto because it's easier. there's a lot of cuevas that will accept crypto. So if you don't want to take like a chunk load of cash with you when you go to Argentina, just make sure you have enough, Tether or Bitcoin or whatever you want to send. And once you get here, they will give you, certain addresses where you can just send that. Then the delivery guy gets to your hostel or hotel, and they just give you the cash. So
Okay. And so do you need a USB, like with your passport, or can you do it by wallets and things like that? I own no crypto. I own
okay.
some stock in a particular crypto miner, but that's its secondary business. It actually has a legit,
Uh-huh.
or what I would consider to be a legit cash flow business.
Yeah.
Is that what you need? You need a USB? Tell me, I'm a complete noob when it comes to crypto.
So no, yeah, you can you can have or a USB, which would be a physical device where you store it, which is more of like cold storage. That's the safest way to guard your assets or keep them safe. And most people will just leave it on an exchange, which is not recommended, because if the exchange goes bust, all your funds are gone. But yeah, a lot of people just leave it on an exchange. You can even not even travel with any physical device if you can remember, or you have your private key stored somewhere. You can always open that wallet somewhere else. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to go around that.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. And I guess it speaks to the use case of Bitcoin being a way where a lot of people think of Bitcoin as this kind of obscure, nefarious thing that happens on the black market, but it doesn't have to come from a place of nefarious activity per se. It can just be a country is just so destroyed in terms of capital controls that the people need a way to move currency or any agreed form of payment in or out. So from that perspective, I do really find it fascinating. What about precious metals? I'm a little bit old school. Bitcoin,
Mhm.
as I said, I don't own any, but I'm interested in some of the miners, given these things can produce. One particular company I own produces a Bitcoin at roughly 5,000 US. And then obviously you've got a very nice margin if Bitcoin starts to, I think it's around 20,000 at the moment. So every Bitcoin they mine, they have a very good margin. Do
Yeah.
you see much use case for precious metals at the moment? Is there a way that people can get their hands on precious metals in Argentina to preserve some of their purchasing power?
So yes, there is a way to buy those gold coins here. There's one of the official banks. They mint them, but then again, like I wouldn't buy them because you can't really trade them on the international market. So if I was going to buy physical gold, I would really want something that was certified by London, or a really renowned gold certifier, or, Kruger Rants or Maple Leaves or
So
whatever.
you're
I
saying
would.
the Argentine minted gold is not universally accepted like your Kruger Rands or your
Yeah, I think it's going to be harder to sell for sure. Yeah, but
what
yeah,
about getting
I'm
gold
also.
into the country? Like if you owned LME bars or small coins, how does that work?
Mhm.
Or how would that work going through customs? Would they ask many questions or you'd have to declare?
Yeah, I think you would be smart to declare that, probably, because if they find it and you don't declare it, there's a high chance of you not recovering that gold. So
There's a
yeah,
recurring
I mean,
theme.
if it's a lot, if it's a couple of coins, I would just like sneak them in, and no problem. But I mean, they even have issues with electronics, because they have like a 50% tax. So any iPhone device or a MacBook or whatever is twice as expensive here, or a little bit more than twice as expensive, just because of the import tax. So there's a huge amount of contraband with the people traveling to the States and serving as mules just to get electronics into the into the country. And at one time, I think they caught like a woman with like 30 or 40 iPhones in her, strapped all around her waist like explosives, and she was trying to get through customs, and she got arrested, of course. You have all kinds of crazy stories like that.
Straight out of Wolf of Wall Street, but instead of dollar bills, it's just the iPhone strapped around the waist.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Latino. I got a lot of cousins. I need to stay in touch with them. What? What?
Yeah, I mean, it happened to me once that I traveled with my old laptop, and I went to Europe and I bought like a new MacBook. I went back, and then because I had two, because you can legally have one on you of any, so you can have one phone, one iPad, one laptop, etc. But I was traveling with two, and then they were like, "Why do you have two laptops?" I was like, "Well, one is my old one, and this is a new one, but it's my personal one that I use for to work." Yeah, but you should declare that, and now you have to pay tax on it. And I literally had to pay 50% of the value.
Wow.
So
So you have a limit as to how many electronic devices.
yes, I mean that's the level of craziness that you run into here. So that's it does bring a lot of interesting opportunities too, because there's just you can flip electronics here like crazy. There's just people doing only that, going from Paraguay to Argentina, sneaking stuff in and selling it here with huge profits, because it's an instant 2x.
Who needs drugs when you've got electronics? I want to touch. I want to go one step further with the taxes before we continue on this ROI theme. I saw you post something on Twitter around, I believe it was plane tickets. It might have been train tickets. I forget. But you showed the actual cost of the ticket, and then you broke down all the taxes on top of that, which added up to be more than the actual cost of transportation. Jog my
Yeah,
memory around that, because I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is like
yeah, that
my
was
worst nightmare.
yeah, it's basically what Airbnb is doing now with most of the fees, where sometimes you get a price per night and you end up paying more than that in fees. And that's the same thing that happens here when you book on local travel sites. When you book a flight out of the country, usually the actual plane ticket is very cheap, and then all the taxes that come on top are just more than that actual plane ticket costs. So it ends up being twice as much just for taxes, and that's all those taxes that are layered on top of each other, and you're paying stuff twice. And yeah, that's just what happens. It's crazy, and that's why it's harder for Argentines or people living here to go out of the country and do a round trip from Buenos Aires as a starting point, versus if you go from any other country in the world to Argentina, tickets aren't actually that expensive. But if you do it vice versa, it's very expensive. Like, for example, now I'm going to go to New York in a couple of weeks, and that ticket is just $1,700. I mean, and if I would do New York, Buenos Aires, and back, it would be maybe 1,100 or 1,200. It's
Incredible,
yeah,
incredible. Uh, I didn't even know. I didn't even know what to say to that. This is what happens when you have a government that's so heavy that the poor little people underneath are just being absolutely smashed to try and support the government, instead of shrinking the damn government, getting out of the way and allowing more of a free market approach. But that might be the subject for another discussion another day. Looking forwards then, so I mean, this has been really interesting, but looking forwards, where do you see the most opportunity in Argentina? Is it a particular asset class? Do you think crypto? Do you think real estate, stocks? I think the local exchanges got a total market cap of like 50 million. That's what I heard. It could be incorrect. Or precious metals. What would your asset class be, and why?
so yeah, in this scenario, I've really shifted a lot in terms of where I allocate my cash. And right now, I'm literally stacking dollars, and I've been doing that ever since for about a year and a half now. So I'm not really investing in anything else besides cash, just because I think as long as the rate hikes continue, it's going to be dollar go up and all the rest going down. So I'm sort of waiting for the Fed to pivot, and once that happens, then things can become more interesting. But yeah, at this time, I don't see anything really worthwhile besides just maintaining purchasing power and maintaining cash and saving in USD. But depending on what happens next year in the elections here, everything always depends on the elections. So if something similar happens as in 2015 when Macri got elected, as the opposing party to the ruling party of the Peronists, which more socialist, etc., then you could see a very interesting uptick in local ADRs for Argentina, and those you can buy on the New York Stock Exchange directly. I own some companies which are I think are good energy companies that will stick around.
Like the EPFs of the world.
Yeah, EPFs I actually do not own just because of the whole shenanigans with their shareholder debt because of the takeover. They have such an issue there with all kinds of fines that it's going to be it's a big mess. So no, it's more like other kinds of companies like that are very heavily invested in local oil fields, etc. They're a bit smaller, but a lot more private. So those could be interesting, especially if the elections, choose somebody else that is more liberal.
Yeah, now you're talking my language in terms of, because there is, I guess things are so thinly traded because there's just not that liquidity. If there were to be a change of government and a change of perception as to the geopolitical risk, even a drop, like a tiny little drop of foreign capital into the Bolsa would lift the valuations of these things, I imagine, by quite a while. So that's very interesting. And we're sticking with cash, we're sticking with US dollars and maybe electronics. Maybe we'll start an electronic import business.
Yeah. Well, electronics for sure. I mean, last time I went to the States, I just got another MacBook just to have another backup. I have about 4 now, but you can never have enough.
You can never have enough.
Also because you don't know what's going to happen with Taiwan. If anything happens there with TSMC, then we could have a serious chip shortage, which nobody can imagine, and then all of a sudden nobody can get laptops anymore. So that's something to prepare
That's an
for.
interesting point. That is a very interesting point. People stacking bullion, people stacking cash, people stacking food, semiconductors. It could be very interesting. We'll have to talk about that. So from your perspective, what's the single biggest action that a listener can take right now to move the needle in their lives from an ROI perspective? Like, we have covered a lot. We've talked about geoarbitrage, we've talked about digital businesses or digital income. What would you say, someone just starting out listening to us saying, okay, I want to improve my income, want to improve my quality of life? Where would you suggest they start?
I would suggest to start by learning a skill that you can resell on the internet and trying to generate as much online income as you can. And this doesn't have to be a passion. It can be anything that you find interesting enough that it can become something that you are very, very good at. And it's a little bit better than with sports, where you really have to have talent. But in today's world, in the digital age, you can really become an expert quite quickly just by doing the work. And if you are just like putting in a little bit more effort than the rest, then you're already you have a head start, and it's a lot easier to make money. And it's really not that hard to generate income. And my main recommendation is just try to get as much income as you can. And if you don't have enough cash for big investments, and then those investments you can always look for more return on that income. But right now in this scenario, I'm still looking for more income, always, just to stack on top of what I already have. And for my personal situation, I don't need to be looking for that, but I just I'm kind of a prepper in that sense. I just always want to have something
Better
just
to
in
be
case,
over prepared. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you'd be a fantastic personal example of that because your passion originally was Spanish literature, and then you learnt to code and you got into the digital space and you created a job for yourself first, earning income online, and then you earned hard currency online, and then you turned that into one business, and now you've built these skills up over almost 2 decades now. And that is what allows you to create the lifestyle that you want. So, very, very sage advice. Before we wrap it up here, is there anything I've missed? Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't, or is there anything that you would like to say before we wrap it up?
Um, no, I think we covered the most important things. I would say anybody interested in Argentina, go check out my guest post for Bowtied Bull. I wrote two, and that is when I basically started in the community, and then afterwards I started my own Substack. But those two give a really good overview of the situation in Argentina. And I also wrote like another chapter afterwards on my own Substack. But that is really the history of why things are the way they are here, and what happened in the last 100 years, and why everything went down the drain from being the #1 GDP country to per capita to what it is now. And yeah, how to survive in hyperinflation environments, which I think well, maybe not all countries are going to enter hyperinflation like we have here, but significant inflation of 20-30%, I think, is definitely possible in even the Western world. So yeah.
Yeah, which is devastating enough as it is. So, links to all the aforementioned material will be in the description, guys. I cannot recommend it enough. Make sure you get on there and have a read. Fascinating stuff. I would love to catch up with you in a couple of months to talk about the situation and see how things may or may not have changed. But in the meantime, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and make sure you check out the links that will be in the description. Goodbye, everybody.